So, Reb David, we're here to honor Eliezer ben Shlomo Levi, Elie Wiesel Zatzal, on the occasion of his 7th Yahrzeit. And we're doing this with the idea that the 92nd Street NY has a unique archive of recorded lectures that he gave, that Professor Wiesel gave, from 1966, 67 till 2014. So we're hoping to share a glimpse of that, a taste of that, and to share our own responses, reactions, and the meaningfulness of Elie Wiesel to us and to the world today. How does that sound?
That sounds beautiful. I mean, it sounds like a real way to honor. Is, part of what we do in the Jewish tradition is we imagine that especially teachers and obviously parents and other ancestors, but certainly teachers who are no longer with us physically, are best remembered when we speak their words of Torah, their words of wisdom, their words of advice, their recollections, especially someone as profoundly influential as Professor Wiesel, whose influence, reverberates. And as they say in the tradition, his lips are moving, as it were, from wherever he is, as it were, as we speak his words of Torah, as we convey and think about the wisdom that he left behind. It's a way of both remembering him and also keeping him alive at the same time. It's a really perfect way to come together to discuss and to reminisce and to reflect and to honor.
Truly, beautifully said. And we have 129 recordings. I don't think we'll get through all of them tonight, but they're there for the taking, for anyone to be able to continue to be his interlocutor, his student, his disciple, his colleague, his friend, through the study of these 129 recorded lectures. And we have a couple of them that we can play a snippet, and we can respond both directly and indirectly. But maybe you have any further introductory words too that you'd like to say before?
There's a lot to say, I think, about what it is to listen to or someone else's teaching, or to read their teaching and then to reflect on it. I think that we're engaging, in this conversation, we're engaging and taking seriously the words that Professor Wiesel left behind, and his images and his profound opening up of the portal for others to enter into this incredibly beautiful and nuanced and uplifting world of Jewish spirituality and Hasidism and Jewish philosophy, and all the other topics that he brought. And in that way, we're, as you said, we're chavruta, we're interlocutors with him, which is, I think, what he would want. So yeah, of course, it's a bechavod, it's an honor to be with you and to learn.
Yes, likewise. And so maybe to just to mention that of these 129 lectures, they were, many of them given as a series, an annual series of lectures, beginning with Tanakh, Bible, and then followed by Talmud. And then the third in the sequence was Hasidism. And then the fourth lecture would often be a reading from his recently published book, or a book that was going to be published. But the Torah lectures were the three that followed one another, and that he felt would give a full view of the Torah world that he savored.
So yeah, so we'll get a chance to taste some of the teachings and some of a snippet from it.
Yes, snippet from it. So the first one is from his Professor Wiesel's 1981 lecture on Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, called "The Commitment to Fervor" is the subtitle. And Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi was the founder of Chabad Hasidism and the author of the Shulchan Aruch HaRav, the Code of Jewish Law, and of the Tanya, great spiritual guidebook, and of many other Torah teachings. And Professor Wiesel was urged by the Lubavitcher Rebbe for many years to write about the Rabbi Shneur Zalman, to write even a book singly about him. And it took some 15 years of the wide lectures before Professor Wiesel honored the occasion with his lecture on Rabbi Shneur Zalman. So let's hear a snippet, and we'll go from there.
This tale of solidarity, suffering, study, and faith, a tale of love as well, the love of Israel, has retained its magic to this very day. For it brings fulfillment and more than that. It brings ecstasy to thousands and thousands of men and women who are part of a community whose center, geographical and spiritual, lies within a half-hour's car ride from where we are gathered tonight. But to acquaint ourselves with it, we must go back 200 years and seek out a place far away on the other side of oceans and mountains, somewhere in Tsarist Russia, in Petersburg, to an ominous fortress, Peter and Paul, that still stands today. In a secret cell of an isolated wing, a solitary prisoner, a famous one. He has been there for weeks and weeks, since the month of Tishrei. It is now almost Hanukkah. How much longer will they keep him in jail? How much longer will his trial continue? Suddenly the door opens and the prison warden enters. He stares at the prisoner for a long, long moment. But the prisoner, lost in meditation, doesn't at first notice the visitor and jumps at the sound of his voice.
That's a good place to leave the prisoner and the warden and Professor Wiesel and come back to our appreciation for Professor Wiesel and the story of Ayeka and the teaching about what it means to be sought after by the Almighty, by God, who asks us, where are you? Not that he doesn't know or God doesn't know, but that we are the ones that have to reveal to ourselves or to one another where we are spiritually. What is the level, the spiritual place, the spiritual space that we inhabit at that age that we are, and what it means to be conscious or become more conscious of that place where we are. Reb David, what do you think about that story, that summons to know where we are.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. I mean, it's an amazing story that the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, as Professor Wiesel called him, known as the old rabbi, the Alter Rebbe's story, which in the context of Chabad, in the context of that school of Lubavitch and Chabad, is an apocryphal story that holds so much in it, because it says so much about what Hasidism is and what spirituality is and what Jewish spirituality can be, and so on, and also universal spirituality. Kind of everything is in that story. Everything is in that story. And the story essentially pivots on this dialogue between the imprisoned and the one who is imprisoned, between the one who is free and the one who is seemingly not free. And it begs the question, it asks, like, in this story, who really is free and who isn't? And in the answer, of course, from Shneor Zalman, from the Alter Rebbe, is only the human being who knows where to locate themselves, the human being who irrespective of geography, irrespective of status, irrespective of of designation as Jew or non-Jew, irrespective of any of those externalities, this story pivots on a question that's as at once kind of so simple and also maybe the most complicated question ever, which is, right, do you know when you're lost? Do you know when you're hiding? Do you know how to hear the call that comes to free you from your prison, right? And the story flips, because the one who is in prison is free and powerful, and the one who is right on the outside, as it were, looking in, is in the dark and is unable to access that inner place and closed off from themselves. And it's an existential crisis, right? To say, here you are trying to show me, you're trying to ask me a question that I can't answer about the Torah, but the Torah asks a question to each and every human being that they also have a hard time answering, and only the one who knows how to answer that question, and to answer it deeply, not from from some scholarly tome, but like from your own inner experience, when God or conscience or anything, life itself calls you and says, where are you? And of course, in the biblical story, the answer is, of course, we were hiding. I noticed that I was naked, right? And so human beings in their state of shame, right, hide. And God calls and says, come out of your hiding. I want to know where you are, but only if you tell me where you are. You have to be the one to tell me where you are. I know where you are, but if you don't know that you're hiding, then and of course, the irony, of course, is you're hiding in full view. So even your hiding is not really functioning in that way. It's just you're living that life. And so, Professor Wiesel, in using this story, I think was turning to each and every human being and saying the essence of the spiritual life is to be able to free yourself from the prison that is not knowing where you are, not being able to answer where you are in life, and not, the shame that comes when God or Spirit says to you, or when the Almighty comes and says, where are you? And you'll be able to say, oh, where am I in my life? How am I with my family? How am I with my community? How am I? Right? Where are you? Is a kind of, are you hiding or not? Are you in denial or not? Are you authentic or not? And that's like the kernel, the essence, the nekudah, the centerpiece, I think, of the Hasidic path and the let's say the spiritual path of Hasidism. What do you think?
So great, Reb David, that such a great set of remarks, and much of which I'm in full agreement of. And I'm particularly taken and moved by your zeroing in on the prison, because here we have our teacher, Eliezer ben Shlomo Elie Wiesel, who is known for his being in a prison, which was called Auschwitz and Buchenwald. So it is he who is not only speaking figuratively about that spiritual prison, but spoke in searing and enlightened words about that prison that he was compelled to dwell in for a year. And so the fact that this story is one that he tells here, but he tells in many other places. He talks about the question of Ayeka, where are you, as being the primordial question. Primordial meaning because it was the first question, as he points out in the Bible, in Tanakh. First question ever asked. And as you highlighted, it is the central question. So he was feeling that, and what do you think about that intersection of the prison within the story, the Alter Rebbe in prison, the warden coming to him, and Professor Wiesel himself being the prisoner who was set free, but continued to recount about what it means to be in a prison, what it means to be let free. What do you think?
I think Professor Wiesel was clearly, thank you for adding that piece. Obviously, as his student and as someone who's so familiar with his work, what gets repeated often has emphasis, in a way that something that's said once doesn't, and the intentionality behind the story. And also, I would also add that, I'm not the first one to add this, and the earliest sages of our Jewish tradition over 2 millennia ago were already pointing out the homonym, or I would say the same letters of the word Ayeka, which means where are you in Hebrew. It's the same letters as the book of Lamentations, Echa, which is how, Echa. And so the rabbis already point to the exact same letters with different vowels, which change the pronunciation of the word. But there is something in Professor Wiesel using this story, because the story returns the focus not on God. The word Echa is really, the book of Lamentations is about the destruction of it's the destruction of Jerusalem and the Holocaust, as it were, a complete decimation of Jewry in the time of the Second Temple. And it's a book that essentially calls on God and says, where were you, God? And of course, the focus of the story that Professor Wiesel brings is the story of where were we? Where's humanity, right? Less theodicy and kind of asking questions about God's justice, and more about where are we as humans, what Heschel called androdacy, like where are the humanity? Like, so I hear in this also a recurring theme in his own writings around humanity's responsibility vis-a-vis one another, and that with every moment where we see, catastrophe and moral decay and indifference, as he would say, happening, the question is, Ayeka, where are we vis-a-vis our fellow human beings? That's what came up for me when you spoke.
Yes. So the end, as we recall, the end of the lecture is Professor Wiesel says again, where are you? Or better, where are we? So that plural that you're touching here, that you're adding, is really something that seems fully in keeping with Professor Wiesel's own sense that it's not just the individual. The individual has to account for one's life and where they are with one's life and the days that they have. But the overarching question, especially in our time, is where are we? Where are we in the wake of the Churban, the destruction of our time, and where are we as a community, Jewishly, and where are we as a world? So I think your inflection, your bringing that plural is so much truly honoring what Elie Wiesel sought to be able to bring our mindfulness to. So maybe at this point we can shift a little bit. The lecture, the class on Rabbi Shlomo Zalman was in 1981, which was the 15th anniversary of Professor Wiesel's lectures at the Y, and he celebrated every anniversary. He made that part and parcel of what he did, and thanked the audience for being by his side, and thanked everyone else with his unfailing gratitude.
Wow.
And the second clip that we have is the beginning of the 40th anniversary. Number of years later, 2006. So 25 years later, and it's a thank God, a Professor Wiesel, who has written many more books, who has given many more lectures, who has taught millions of more people, who's been honored with many awards for his arduous activity and worldwide concerns. So this 2006 lecture is called Come Celebrate, the 40th year. And celebration was something at the core of who Professor Wiesel was. And we'll see a little bit of that here. This is a video, so we'll be able to see him in action.
The topic before us is come and celebrate. So let us celebrate. What should we celebrate? Should we celebrate the fact that at the beginning of the 21st century, freedom and solidarity still exist here and there, in many places, in our own country surely, in Israel certainly? Should we celebrate what we always try to celebrate until now for the last 40 years, the value, the attraction, the melodious inspiration of learning, and that learning has an appeal, and you here are the living proof that it has an appeal? Should we celebrate that our people has never lost its thirst for knowledge and peace? Should we celebrate Israel? We always do, we always must. That Israel is strong and vibrant, that in spite of all the challenges, the threats, the dangers, the tragedies, Israel is still singing its love for the future, its love for the past, and what we all cherish, memory.
A good place to sing. And at the end of this clip, Professor Wiesel sings in celebration, sings the Vishnitzer Hasidic melody of Ani Mamin, I believe, in the coming of the Messiah, and which he did also at the 20th anniversary and the 30th anniversary. So song and singing, and melodies, which he refers to here, are woven into the fabric of celebration. What do you think about this?
Oh my gosh! It's really that phrase, melodious inspiration. And I love that he there's so much about the text of Professor Wiesel's speaking, that he wrote this with such kavanah, which is such an important word, with such intention and meticulous detail. To ask it in this, the rhetorical flourish, to ask it in that question, what should we celebrate? And then to make a litany of things. It's almost like, in various places in our tradition where it says, like this famous story in the Gemara, in the Talmudic story where the man says to the tree, how should I, in what way can I praise you? And then goes on to list all the things that are already, as if it's a question. It's already, his litany of the list here is it's so obvious that these are things to celebrate. And he asks it as if it's, there's a seeking involved in it as well. There's always a seeking involved in knowledge, like the seeking after knowledge. And he says it like a pedagogue, like to a child. So how should we celebrate? And then he says, should it be this? And in saying that, of course, he's saying, yes, it is this, right? But it makes you realize, like in the Dayenu, song of the Haggadah, like, had we just been taken out of Egypt, and had we, should we celebrate the fact that we are sitting here, all of us? This is celebratory. The very thing, the thing that we're not here to celebrate anything other than the fact that we're alive here and that we're still here, right? That we're still a people. And it begins with that basic, the basic premise of existence being its own celebratory, right? We celebrate because we're here to celebrate. Shechiyanu v'kiyamanu. And then he goes on to say, and we also celebrate because we're people that, and then he draws attention to the givenness of things. And all celebration, Professor Wiesel seems to be saying, begins with the question of what we take as assumed or take for granted or take as a given. The givenness of our own reality, once called into question, becomes the fuel for gratitude and for celebration. Wow, we're here. We have a state of Israel, right? We can walk proudly, maybe not as much as we would like, and Professor Wiesel would probably lament it along with us, that it's the diminishment of some of that safety that we've come to take for granted here in the United States. But right, wow, we can have an institution where we talk about Judaism and we learn, and we have a state of Israel and so on. So it's just a remarkable way to begin a celebratory lecture, is to draw attention to all of the ways, all the reasons for celebration. Love that. I just love that he did that.
So great, Reb David. Such a stirring and I think fitting reflection. And that, as I think you were saying too, and pointing out, very question of celebration is Torah, meaning celebration, isn't that enough? Why should we even pose the question? Isn't that an emotion? Isn't that something that you just step into? So Professor Wiesel is saying, no, our business in learning Torah is to ask questions, to take nothing for granted. Everything becomes more of what it is and more deeper than what we felt before by asking these questions. And your mention of Dayenu and the Hagim, the holidays, he goes on a little bit further to say, should we celebrate simply occasions that need celebration? By law, by Jewish law, Purim behind us, Passover before us, and these are great holidays. And then goes on unfolding the holidays into this litany, as you rightly referred to it, of questions. So even the calendar's regular cycle of providing us with great spiritual nourishment through these stirring celebrations becomes an occasion for question. And that is so much who he was as a Ben Torah, as a student and teacher of Torah. And the why was his, as he said, was his yeshiva, his cheder, his place for teaching Torah. So of course, ask what celebration, what we're supposed to celebrate. Of course.
It's not lost on any of us that he chose a place whose name, maybe not now, but at one point, we can still say it though, I think, it's just the name of this place is why. And so it's a question itself. And I always say when I used to teach in shuls, I would go somewhere and I would say, whenever you're teaching, you pose a question that people might not have been thinking was, it's a klutz kasha. They ask a question that's really not. I'd say, what's the most important moment in the Jewish calendar? And people will inevitably say it's the Passover Seder, it's the Kol Nidre prayer on Yom Kippur and the Day of Atonement. And I say, no, I think the most important moment is when the child at the Seder stands up and says, Ma nishtana. Because I think that in our tradition, we say, Ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mimach. What does God ask of you? It says in the book of Deuteronomy. And so one of our teachers said, God asks for us to have good questions, like Rilke's, ask the right questions. And so I think that Professor Wiesel was the ultimate, he loved the good question in that way. And he also thought that the spiritual path, right, is not about, we sometimes know that people who become observant later in their lives are called Ba'alei Tshuva, masters of returning. The word teshuva means to return. But you can read that as the ones who become the masters of the answers, because in modern Hebrew, tshuva is an answer. And I think that Professor Wiesel would say, no, we need a lot of Ba'alei She'ela, people who ask the right kinds of questions, people who know that what you said, that to take life for granted that way is to be in some way, to not hear the melodious inspiration at the end of a well-formed question that can lead into enchantment, can lead into surprise, can lead into gratitude. I think it feels that was what he was trying to say. It's like, I don't know. I loved what you said about a good question. That is, asking it so that celebration can be possible. I love that. Love that.
And that's so great. What we're seeing is the way that this question of what we're to celebrate harks back then to the first clip that we saw, the primordial question. Where are you, Ayeka? What it is that can, at least hypothetically, take one out of a prison is to ask a question. That is the lever that can catapult one out of prison, maybe even while one's still in prison. And it's always so moving to me that Professor Wiesel's preoccupation, passion for celebration, for asking questions about it, but also celebration. Here's someone who's so much associated with the Ayeka side of life, with the Korban side of life, with the side of Jewish life that is destruction. But in truth, Professor Wiesel was embracing all the time celebration. That's these lectures that we have the privilege to have access to through the Wise Archive, great archive, found their way into book after book, which in the original French, Professor Wiesel wrote in French in the original form. In the original French, each and every volume was called Celebration, celebration, celebration of Hasidism, celebration of Bible, celebration of Talmud, over and over again. So this passion for celebration was at the center of who he was, and I believe who he felt a Jew was and should be.
He focuses on the state of Israel, which of course, in the aftermath of the Shoah, for him was something hard to imagine, right? That child who had experienced such devastation would then imagine a future. This. It's really beautiful that he comes to Israel, and that he comes also to memory, that something we all cherish is memory. And I think that he is, in both of these valences, I think, inviting us to both, to ask the right questions, to recognize in his own person someone who experienced, as you said, the Ayeka, the Korban, how could this happen? And that it led him into the obligation to demand that humanity shows up and remembers to ask the question of themselves, so that they might be held accountable. Where am I? But also to hold it in the second way, which you said beautifully too, which is that, celebrating life means rebirth is possible. Celebrating life means noting that you're here, and that's a miracle, and that's something to celebrate, and not to lose sight of that. I think that's ultimately a profoundly important thing to give over. What a gift to everybody to celebrate. To be Jewish is to celebrate as much as possible. Learning. Often the great philosopher Rabbi David Hartman spoke about Sinai and Auschwitz, right? He said that there's of course Auschwitz. Jewish history is full of that, but we're being pulled, he said, by Sinai. pulled by learning, pulled by meaning, pulled by stories, pulled by wisdom, pulled by holiday celebrations, pulled by the miracle of Jewish, revival. It has that beautiful arc, as you said, that he believed in life's celebration, even when things were dark and difficult. It's a great legacy. It's a great legacy.
Yeah, it's true. A little bit further on, he says that celebration is one of the mitzvahs. You have to celebrate even if you don't want to. And the Gaon of Vilna, the Vilna Gaon, he once wrote that it's the most difficult mitzvah, the most difficult commandment to fulfill. So Professor Wiesel says, I never understood it. What's so difficult? You go to a Hasidic, for bringing a Hasidic celebration, you drink a little bit, you rejoice, and you sing. What's the problem? Later on, I remembered during those years, those dark years, where it was so difficult, it was impossible to rejoice. And yet, because of the need and the fact that it's a mitzvah, some people managed even there, in those dark places, managed even there to rejoice. So, and woven through his immense amount of teachings is this capacity, both for rebirth, what you said, which Professor Wiesel refers to as to begin again and again, and also the capacity, even at those points of darkness, and even especially at those points of darkness, to celebrate. And it's almost uncanny, that kind of way in which through these amazing lectures, we're able to see the way celebration is articulated by Professor Wiesel in the teaching of Torah, in the questions that are asked, in the reference to Israel, in the reference to holidays, in singing, in his continued connection with Vishnitz Hasidism, which is where the cradle from which he came. And all of that is part of his life, and beautifully part of these why lectures. And you mentioned that why has that double entendre as the question, why? But it also has the initial of yeshiva. I'm not sure it was, started with that in mind. But clearly, Professor Wiesel, when speaking about the why as a yeshiva, the why took on a new identity, even as many of the people who came to those lectures were given a new identity, and we now can have an enriched and enhanced and deepened identity by and through this amazing repertoire of 129 lectures.
I mean, there's so much we could talk. I could say more, and I look forward to having many, many more conversations with you, Dr. Rosen. And it's just a big zchut. It's a big honor to be able to talk about someone who has such a profound impact on your life and on my life and on the life of the Jewish people, and someone who in some way bore witness to the absolute, the banality of evil, the most profoundly low moment in Jewish history, certainly, and maybe in human history. And yet here he is at the Y, singing a Vishnitzer song. Here he is at the Y, giving a lecture and trying to capture for those who were in the audience and those who would come later on and watch, that when we think about that period, we obviously think about the horrors that took place, but that wouldn't do justice to the beauty and the sublimity of that period beforehand, and what that gave those people who went through that experience. And here he is trying to convey the depth of the Hasidic life, or of the life of spirit that is celebrating every moment. And then there he is embodying it too in his own life, rising up from the ashes like the phoenix, able to sing and to then convey and to tell people, many of whom like me grew up in an America where, frankly, we've been extremely blessed. We have much to celebrate, but we were impoverished in some way by the things that we, that we never experienced. That was the life that Professor Wiesel knew, the joy and the uplift. And many of us who are here in this space and in other spaces, in our lives, when we think of Judaism, right, he wanted us to think of a Judaism that was relevant and alive and ecstatic, as from the Chabad to ecstatic, a Judaism that held the keys to releasing us from our personal and collective prisons. Right? I think that he was trying clearly to give over, as we would say in the yeshiva world, to give it over, to convey, to transmit that framing of Jewish life, not just as something that is kept in a museum, but something that you live. It's fabrent, it's on fire, it's alive. To live Jewishly is not just to live it, as if it were cold. Live it, live it in your bones, in your kishkes, in your insides. So I felt that in him, in his invitation here as well. To make the Y into yeshiva is a beautiful image. It's beautiful.
And it's with God's help, that it continues to be both an image, but a reality as well, that we are privileged to have a part in. And this commemoration of Professor Wiesel's 7th Yahrzeit, the Yahrzeit of Elie Wiesel ben Shlomo Elie Wiesel Zatzal, that his neshama should have an aliyah, his soul should have an ascent, and that the words of Torah that are his, that circulate, will continue to bring that about. And the Torah that he stimulated and continues to stimulate will certainly do that. And your precious words, Reb David, certainly add to that deeply, fully, resonantly. It's been a privilege to be able to share this with you. And as you said, we, God willing, will have many more occasions to commemorate and to celebrate this life that continues to make us vibrant, to make us on fire, to make us a soul on fire. So may we aspire and move toward achieving what Professor Wiesel asked of us.
Amen.